So good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Telecommunications Public Information Meeting. I have my Bow Telecommunications Committee here. I am Dee Tribig, I'm chair of the committee. And tonight we are going to present to you all of our findings. Welcome and thank you for taking the time to attend and learn all this information. So we were told to create a committee to get this done, and that's what we've done. Ian?
So the committee was started about 18 months ago, headed by Dee Tribig, Deb McCann, Mike Wheeler, Marilee. Before me, it was Mike Wayne as the selectman representative. Now, since Mike's term is up, I'm the selectman representative. We also have this great guy, Mark Nolan, who is neighbors with Mike. He is an RF professional. He explained everything thoroughly, so we could understand what it actually meant. So it was fortunate to have him be part of this committee.
We need a video on that website.
And the videos on the website.
So our agenda tonight is we've got the mission of the committee, the history, charge, cell service 101. So you'll learn a bit more about cell service, community survey results, propagation maps, conclusions and next steps, public resources, and Q&A time. First of all, our charge that we were given as a committee, I'm just going to go over those 9 charges. So review telecommunications plans created by other communities. Review some provisions that are in the Bow zoning ordinance and look at those. Look at the state's telecommunications information and planning guideline. Get an independent RF coverage. Consult with surrounding towns. Advise and assist the planning board. Post on the town's websites all of the information for the public. And invite if needed any information from the public and have the public information session, and advise the select board about preparing and distributing requests for proposals and the results. Marilee?
So we've actually, over the last, I'm not sure how to operate.
Oh, do I
this,
tell
so
you?
I'm
Okay.
just gonna look at you, okay?
You got it.
So over the last couple of, say, several years, we've had 2 different efforts to improve cell tower coverage in our town. It was in the late, maybe 2017, 2018 era that it became a growing concern for us who have lived here for a while and for new people moving in who didn't realize that they wouldn't have cell coverage when they moved here. So a group of individuals got together in 2019. We call ourselves an unofficial committee because it was not a sanctioned select board committee. However, we did work with town representatives. We met probably 5 or 6 times to talk about the problem and figure out solutions. There were probably 7 or 8 people on that committee. I get to speak about this history because I was part of that committee. We also had, if you know, Matt Furr, Dave Farr, Martin Osterloh. There were 3 or 4 other individuals who were a part of that discussion. And ultimately, our goals were at the time to improve coverage at the schools for safety purposes. That was our #1 concern. Second concern was to improve coverage for residents at their homes, and particularly when they're traveling through town and experience a number of drop calls. So out of the work that we did then, we had identified the location of property that is owned by the town. Behind the old town hall is an ideal site for a new cell tower. It was centrally located, it had a reasonable amount of height. There were a fair amount of residents there that would experience improvements And so out of that, we went to the planning board, zoning board, and got our proper warrants and created what has been known in the past as the Rising Tide Tower, because they were ultimately the company that built the tower. They recently sold it to another company, so we now call it the Bow Center Tower, just as a general reference in case towers exchange hands. So that tower came live this spring. We now have AT&T as the first provider that is on that tower. We understand that those who have AT&T service have experienced improvements since they went live. The next provider we understand is going to be Verizon. They're expected to go on sometime this fall. We're all hopeful for that. And we'll get new coverage out of that. So that's the effort from the first group. So after that warrant was passed and we got approvals to build that tower, a petition was presented to create a new telecommunications committee for the purposes of developing a town-wide cell plan. It's good that we took a first step as a town to improve our cell tower coverage by putting up the Bow Center Tower, but it doesn't solve the problem as a whole. And we want to be able to solve the problem for as many people as possible with the fewest possible towers, if that makes sense. So out of that, the select board created a new sanctioned committee, the one that you were just introduced to develop a comprehensive plan for cell coverage in our town. That committee was formed in March of 2023. We have met regularly. Between then, we've kept the select board up to date, and tonight is all about showing you the work that we've done and what our next steps as a town can be.
Ian. Thanks, Mary Lou.
Yes.
So, we want to create and present, the committee is going to create and present it to the select board, kind of the overall, what we've done with, isotopes. We've created these maps and find out the ideal locations. And, you know, it's not a pinpoint, it's not an exact location, but it's a pinpoint of where we want to put the towers. But, the plan will include specific recommendations for the construction location of the cell towers that will achieve this coverage, while balancing the town's interest in minimizing the number of towers to be constructed and the cost of the town. So ideally, we want to have the most amount of coverage with the least amount of towers. We've learned one tower was really hard to do, and so we don't want to interrupt too many people, but also provide the same amount of coverage. But the plan will provide a timetable for accomplishing the task recommended and achieving the stated goals. So once we finish our charge with this committee, we'll present it to the select board and we'll have a new charge trying to establish new towers, new locations, kind of narrowing down the locations and keeping in mind with the least amount of disruption.
Was there a problem?
No.
Oh, sure. So charge number one that the committee was given was to review the telecommunications plans with other communities had done. I mean, why reinvent the wheel? So we got a hold of many places, and not necessarily all in New Hampshire, because there weren't a lot in New Hampshire. But we talked to Hopkinton, we talked to Dumbarton, we found a really interesting study in Jamestown, Rhode Island, Meredith, New Hampshire, Stratford, New Hampshire, Concord, Rye, and Sutton. were some of the key towns that we talked to and just found like, what did you guys do to make this work? And we mainly, we learned from all this communication with other towns is that you need a town plan. You can't just be, sticking towers here and there. Like you just need overall plan that's best to attract carriers and to get your mission done of getting the best cell coverage for your community. Stratford was probably the one we used the most because they were actively working with a developer and learned a lot from them about the steps.
I'm Karen Mackin. I'm the Community Development Director for the town, and I have participated with this committee on this project. So I'll present a few of the slides as well. So our second charge was to review the zoning ordinance section that relates to cell towers. So the committee reviewed and familiarized ourselves with the ordinance in more detail, and we compared it to other ordinances in other communities to find out what works for them. And the planning board proposed several amendments to this ordinance for the 2024 town meeting. And this relates to another charge, so we'll get into more details of that down the line. Charge number 3 was to review and utilize a document called Planning for Wireless Telecommunications from the New Hampshire Office of Energy and Planning. This document is a little bit dated. It was from 2014, but we did review it and added it to our base of knowledge as we conducted our research. Charge number 4 was to obtain an independent RF coverage evaluation of the town to determine missing coverage areas and possible tower placement. So this was a major part of our work. We prepared an RFP and selected a consultant to work with. We'll get into more of those details down the line in the presentation as well. And in addition, the planning board contracted to get a third-party RF evaluation specifically for that Rising Tide Bow Center tower, which the committee also reviewed. Yeah, I think we have more info on that in other slides. Charge number 5 was to consult with the town of Dunbarton to see if there are opportunities for collaboration. So we did reach out to the town of Dunbarton and had an initial conversation to look for ways that we could collaborate. I think they were definitely open to the possibility, a tower doesn't end, the coverage doesn't end at the town boundaries. So it's important to consider maybe there was a tower that would be just right that would end up in Dunbarton that would provide bow coverage. So we wanted to make sure that we were open in what we were looking at and not just looking strictly within those boundaries. So there may be possibilities to work with them more in the future. And charge number 6 is to advise and assist the planning board to develop potential amendments to the zoning ordinance. And so for the 2024 town meeting, the planning board did present several amendments to this ordinance. Major points of that were increasing the maximum tower height from 90 to 190 feet. And we all learned that a 90-foot tower just wasn't going to meet our needs for coverage and wasn't realistic in our landscape here today. And then additionally, previously the ordinance had strict requirements that towers must use stealth technology and camouflage that we found were sometimes unrealistic. And if you have a tower that's 100 feet higher than the tree line, it's just unrealistic to require that there was camouflage because there's no possible way to camouflage it in a way that's effective. So those were some basic changes that were made to the ordinance. I think there are still additional opportunities to revamp the ordinance further, but it was almost a triage situation. We took care of some of those really important basic steps that needed work, and then there'll be opportunities at each town meeting to take it further if it's necessary.
The next couple of charges are all about communication. So charge 7 is to post on the town website the notice of the meeting, just like any other town committee. We've done 19 months of service to the town. We've had 21 public meetings that have been posted on the town committee calendar. They've been open to the public the entire time, as well as the agendas and minutes, which are currently in, I mean, the last couple of meetings, I think still need to be posted. We've done 4 formal select reports to the select board, either via our meeting minutes and the town Facebook page, and Concord Monitor has been really good. And this is what it looks like from if you do the drop down from the town website. That's for number 7. Number 8 is to involve the public, the general public, and the townspeople, and conduct at least one public information session, which we're here for. The survey was a 9-question survey. The original survey was 2019 from the other committee. This one was just this year. It was created and distributed, and we have the results in this presentation. And this public information session is part of charge 8. And this one, charge 9, is advise select board about preparing and distributing the RFPs and evaluating the proposals that come in. So the RFPs are going to be including independent RFP evaluation of the town, which was done through Isotope, one of the companies that had put in for it. And then he's going to describe later the different aspects of building a tower and the people that are involved in it, but the future telecom development proposal under consideration by the committee for the next steps. So, and we're here.
So a really important part we realized in the education and sharing all this information is if you don't understand how everything works, then you're not going to understand what we're talking about in the first place. So we're just going to do a little, Cell 101 knowledge here. So, and that is our beautiful new Bow Center Tower there. So first of all, how is the industry organized? Well, this is the list, and it gets a little convoluted and complicated. There's different types. There's these speculators. These are people that like buy a piece of land they think might be an ideal cell tower situation, and hope someone buys it from them. Maybe make a lot of money. You have developers. These guys work with people that have land or town land, and they basically make it easier for the carriers to come in. They get the leases. They go through the permit process with the town. They have everything. So all this, the tower builder or the carrier needs to just literally come in and put the tower. And that's very inviting and attractive to carriers, is one of the things we've learned talking to other towns in our research. Builders, this is like what we had with our Bow Center Tower. Rising Tide was the contractor, but it was a wireless, I don't know the name of them now. Wireless partners, or it was a very reputable firm. We were happy to find out they had an excellent reputation, and we did a really nice job putting it up. They were very clean at the construction site. Those are the builders. And so Rising Tide basically contracted them to actually build the tower. Sometimes a company will do both and then sell it after they're done. Operators, they do the site work, they construct the towers, and then they rent the tower space to cell providers. Providers are carriers, we all know what those are, whether you have AT&T or Verizon, and this is actually running the day-to-day cell operation and using the tower for signals. And then you have the cell tower companies. These cell tower companies own, lease, and operate towers, and one of the things we've learned in all this is that there are the big 3. We'll talk about those. So the big 3 tower companies in the U.S. are American Tower, Crown Castle, and SBA Communications. These 3 here. These guys have huge markets. I mean, look at some of this is 2015 revenue. I couldn't find a current one, but I mean, it's all billions of dollars. Market cap, 47.95, 30. So these are the top 3 in the U.S. The one that bought the tower that we have, the Bow Center Tower, is this one here, SBA Communications. So one of the big 3 bought our tower. How does your cell phone work? So you pick up the cell phone, you dial it, you text or you call, and what it first does, it goes to a tower, the local tower. Now, one of the things that's been confusing with our new tower that we have up is it's only AT&T, so therefore Verizon doesn't work any better. You'll see in the survey that most of us have Verizon. It doesn't work any better because Verizon's not up there with antenna yet. The only antennas that are up there are AT&T. So until other carriers are put up there, it's not gonna work better for you to have service that's not AT&T. But you turn your phone on and it goes to this nearest tower, and then it goes into this access point, and the antennas are receivers and transmitters, by the way. Then from there, it goes to a routing to find the other phone that you're trying to find. And then if you're moving like along on the road, it might even transfer to another tower as you're bouncing along on the road. This all keeps happening, obviously, very quickly as we keep our calls. So it's pretty interesting how it all works from the phone to the antenna, to the tower, into the processing center, back out to the tower. So looking at a tower and its operation, it's actually pretty fascinating. So I'm going to give you some other facts here. Things to know about a cell tower, for instance, is the average, or say the maximum range of a cell tower is 25 miles. That's the maximum range of a cell tower. If they're in a very open, easy access area, it's a high tower, it could get up to 45 miles, but the average is 25. So every tower you can put up 25. But due to lots of factors, which Bo has a bunch of these obstacles, the average radius is really 1 to 3 miles. Every tower that's going up is only 1 to 3 miles, despite its potential, because there's all kinds of objects in the way. Dense urban environments, geography, I mean, all that are factors. So we're going to talk about the Bo topography a little bit later on in the presentation, but look at our geography in Bo, and we're full hills. So, in granite hills and bedrock. So it's hitting all this stuff. Every tower is, and the signals are running into these obstacles. You also have to have so much power at the tower. You have frequency bands. The low bands go out farther, but the high bands like 5G are shorter range. So that presents another obstacle. The bigger the band, the shorter the range. And then you have just antenna height and design. So we do have in Bo now the maximum tower height of 190 feet, which is good. Anything higher, you have to get FAA regulations that light has to be put on top of it. So we won't be seeing any of those. Those are very rare. So that's as high as it can go. And then from there, you have on the top, you have your antenna, whichever is the highest has the best range, so whatever carrier this is, and then it goes down from there. The lower they are on the tower, the less range they're going to have. So, as I said, your cell service carrier, it matters. You know, who you calling, what service do they have, what service do you have? It's all a factor in here. So, the cell tower that we, just put up is not the magic tower. It's limited where it can go and how far it can go and what services it's going to provide. So, how does the cell tower work in general? I showed you a little bit of it, but these antennas, this is one carrier that's going to go here. This could be FirstNet. That's one of the things we're going to talk about there. Is also later on in the presentation is how the different aspects for emergency services. So emergency services will go on top. Then you have the actual carrier. So this would be 1, and then it could be 2, and then it would be 3, and then 4. Most cell towers can do 4 carriers. Some can do 6 if they're really tall. We've been told that ours is going to be more like 4 at the max. What types of towers? This is really interesting. I hope you will find it to be the same. There's the monopole tower, which is obviously mono, one pole. And this is the least expensive type of tower to put up, but you have to drill deep into the ground to support it. So what problem would that present, Bo? Yeah, they're not going to do it. Hence, we are preferred, our community is preferred for the lattice tower, the self-supporting tower. It's limited how far the tiles have to go into the ground, and it can hold quite a bit of weight. So if you look at this one, you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 carriers on it. Same with this one. Oh no, that one's got antennas, so it could be 4. Then you have the guided, I'm not even sure I'm saying that right, but guided, which is guided wires, towers. Those are the older ones, but they're still out there, where you have to have the wires out, and all the obstacles of that, and all that way out. They're the dangerous they can break. So that's another time. And then you got the cell tower, which that's pretty neat that you can actually put a building up. A lot of opportunities there. Here's the camouflage tower we mentioned. That one doesn't, I don't think looks that bad because it looks sort of in proportion. And then you got the different parts of the country and the world. You can do these. That whole thing is a tower. So pretty, not so unattractive there. This is what was labeled as the ugliest camouflage tree tower. I mean, I bet a beaver wouldn't even go after that one. But it does sort of blend in, so I can't really say anything. Out in the west, you're gonna see these very creative towers, all lined up on the road. So while we're educating, I thought we just would bring some awareness to all the different kinds of towers are out there. And then this is obviously a very tall monopole, which really stands out. But doesn't look that bad, I don't think. Again, going back to our tower, right on the Branchland Dairy Turnpike East at the turnaround there. How many people here have gone to see it? You're going to check it out? Go check it out. You can see what we have on here. This is the base with all the fencing around it for security. And then you can see this is just AT&T and FirstNet up there. So Verizon is already permitted. We're just waiting for them to put it on. They have permission, everything's good to go, and they're gonna go right below. Nobody else has signed up yet. So those are the two we know are gonna happen, or one has happened. All right, gonna take a break. What did the phone say to the cell tower? That's pretty good. Thank you for your service. All right, surveys. Mary Lee. Survey queen.
Both the 2019 committee and the current committee have conducted surveys to gauge the community's interest in developing better cell coverage, and to kind of garner some information that would guide both the committees' work on how to proceed. I will say that neither one of these surveys were scientific surveys. The first one was a Survey Monkey. The second one was a Google survey. They were advertised on the local community Facebook page and solicited individuals to respond. Did we advertise anywhere else?
Oh, school, library,
Right.
White Rock.
Right.
Yeah, we did a lot.
Yeah, we tried to get the word out as best we could. I think we got a reasonable response in both surveys. The one back in 2019, 920 responses. The next one, 780 something responses. Out of that, we did find a lack of some frustration on the residents on the cell coverage they were receiving. And so what I'd like to do now is just go through the most recent survey, just to show you what those results were like. So, first question on the 2020, this was early 2024. Based on the map and the descriptions provided, in which quadrant of Bow do you either live or work? Now, this is a north, south, east, west map, so you can probably figure out where you live. Most of the survey respondents, about 45%, lived in the northwest corner of our town. I assume that that is a combination of that's where the density of our population is, as well as that's where the greatest lack of coverage is that we have. And if you look at the maps, you can see that happening. Number two, who is your cell phone carrier provider? We asked this question so that we would have some information on who we wanted to market to if we need to go out and solicit carriers to come into our town. 68, and I'll tell you, out of all of these options here on all of the survey questions, these are not ranked. So don't look at the first one and think you have the right answer. So look at the color, almost 70% is Verizon. And then AT&T is number 2. But it's amazing how many of us have Verizon as a carrier. And I honestly do believe, based on AT&T coming into the Bow Center Tower, that once Verizon gets up there, many of us will have better coverage, particularly those who do work on their phones while they're traveling up and down Bow Center Woodhill area. So question number 3, when inside your Bow home, you connect to your Wi-Fi. We were trying to figure out, is cell coverage in your home as important as it has been in the past? And you can see almost 93% automatically cover using their Wi-Fi. Number 4, when inside your Bow home or workplace, what is the quality of your cell connection, regardless of your Wi-Fi connection? And you look at 47 and 20, that's almost 70% either say extremely poor or very poor. That's a staggering statistic. When in your yard, not inside your house, but outside your house, does it make a difference? Does your connection to your cell provider make a difference? And there was a slight improvement, but still between 41 and 23 for very poor and extremely poor. This one is interesting. If you have a landline at your home, well, and wait till the next question. What service do you use? 57%, I do not have a landline, which means people are relying on their, do we still have a landline? I'm trying to get rid of it. But I can't get rid of it just yet. It's amazing. I do not have a landline of any type. I think that might be the younger generation talking here. So,
Oh, Mary, do you want to talk about the voiceover?
you can. What did you want to say about that?
So I was just gonna add that many people don't have the landline with the company, but they have the voice over internet service, like the UMAs or all that kind of stuff. That's sort of covered in the next one. So I think many people are transitioning slowly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
To add to your comment there.
Yes. All right, this gets at the school situation. What is your level of concern about the lack of phone coverage at both schools? What we know about both schools is they're down in the valley. So whatever coverage we have is going to float right on top of them and not get there. And secondly, schools made out of what? Brick and concrete, and cell coverage can't penetrate that kind of material. So we have 25 and 47% are either very concerned or critically or extremely concerned. That's really significant. What we know about our school coverage at the current time is that we believe that kids can get coverage, particularly better AT&T coverage in the recent months, but they can get coverage when they're outside the school building, and that they're now able to connect to the schools. Don't quote me on this because I'm not an expert on the terms, but they can connect while they're inside on the school's Wi-Fi system. And I already see heads saying no, and we can talk about that during the Q&A. That would be really, really important. What we know is there's also some things that can improve coverage at our school systems, better coverage throughout our town. And putting some boosters in place, which I assume they've already done, but I don't know that for sure. What's important here, we did talk to Superintendent Cascadian, the superintendent who just retired. And he was very confident that if they had a safety concern, that they had adequate emergency communications to handle it. What route do you normally take to get to work or commute wherever you're going during your day? That was important so that we could hone in on where to provide coverage in our towns. And not surprisingly, most of the people, 45%, are traveling the Wood Hill, Logging Hill corridor. Okay, this one was just to provide us some guidance for tonight. Are you interested in coming to the information session? If so, would you want to watch from home or do you want to come meet with us? I want to say I would prefer to attend in person, was 15%. Out of 784 responses, 150 people. So, but thank you. In how many? 12 months. 12 months. Excellent. Okay. Oh, now comes the good stuff. It's all good.
Yeah, I guess talk about the maps. What might be why a lot of you are here.
Would you look it up?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I was just saying one. All right, so as we already discussed, one of our major charges was to obtain an independent RX study. And so the committee prepared a request for proposals. We received five responses to that request and selected Isotrope. They were selected because they were a local company. Their rate of $6,000 was competitive with the other options that were presented, and that they were generally highly regarded and well respected for the work that they do. So the committee worked with Isotrope over a period of several months. We reviewed maps of the existing coverage and then plotted potential new towers. The consultant used their expertise to determine recommended areas to place towers that would best fill those coverage gaps that we all know exist in town. And the final approved report from Isotrope is available on our website. And I'm going to go through some of the maps that were created through that process. First of all, I do want to point out that the coverage maps that we worked on with Isotrope were plotted at two different megahertz. Was that? Wait, yeah, in bands. Bands, that's the word. Okay, two different bands. Our committee chose to focus on the 700 megahertz band, the low band, and that is the band that is used for your voice calls and your texting. Our charge as a committee was focused on safety aspects and primarily focused on those calls and texts. We did not focus on the data uses that are also important for a lot of users, but for different reasons. So all the maps you see will be plotted at 700 megahertz. We do also have some maps that are plotted at 1900, which are the higher band. We didn't include those in our presentation, but if anyone's interested, we have them available as well. Who's going to talk about topography? That you were. Or you want me to do it? We can tag team it. Okay. All right. So first, it was important to point out that Bow isn't flat. We have a lot of obstacles if you were going to plot cell towers in an open rectangle over a town, it would be a very different scenario than we have here in Bow.
Pembroke's a good example, right? So if anybody's seen cell towers in Pembroke, they have a ridge and they just line them all up on the ridge and they just broadcast out. It's a beautiful setup. We don't have that setup.
So we have some hills, and on this map, you can see the red areas are the higher elevations. And those really obstruct the traveling of the waves.
Look at that one in the next one.
So you can see this is the outline of the town of Bow. You can see there's a lot of high areas in this part of town, and those are a lot of the areas of town that really suffer from poor coverage. Anything else to add? Feel free to just jump
No.
in. Anything else about these ones in particular?
So I put this one in because just to see, and I don't know if people realize that we have this line of hills in Bow. It's not really something, you know, Brown Hill, so there's Brown Hill at the top. You got Wood Hill, but they're actually in a line. So the cell towers are hitting these walls. And then everything else in the valley is just missing out, which is really one of our big challenges. You look at Dumbarton Center Road, going to Dumbarton, and that goes, I mean, it has, oh, can you go back to the, so you can see the Dumbarton Center Road here. They have the same thing. So it's just, our scenario is we have a lot of granite bedrock walls that are not conducive to cell tower coverage. And I thought this was interesting just to put the height. I don't know if people realize that the White Rock hilltop is 735 feet and Brown Hill is 882. They're not small hills. And this is just going into the other area with Dumbarton. Everybody knows that deep abyss that you go through. You're traveling on the back roads to Dumbarton, going out to Manchester and Hookton. And this is why it's got these 700 foot, 800 foot elevation that are blocking a lot of the cell towers. Yeah.
So what's important to remember is, like, the obvious thing to say, well, why don't we just put it on top of the hill? Right, but it would go over you. We could have a tower at that plot and it would go over. It wouldn't work for you there. So you have to, that's the challenge with Bow, is find the right spot that's accessible, get power there. Right, so like that's a major issue. So how do we get the utilities there? But also in a spot that's the Goldilocks spot, not too high, not too low. Because if you're up here, you miss all the down here, and if you're down here, up here, doesn't work. You've got to find that right spot. So that is actually the challenge with all this. And so that's why it's important for people to understand the elevation. The gains are dramatic. It's 100 feet over it's a short period. You don't actually realize that. So any obstruction stops the signal. So it's important to remember that as we look at all these things and say, well, why? I'm right here. Well, why doesn't it work? But you got to remember where the tower is, how it projects. There was that slide a few slides ago and it had the rings around it. That's essentially what it does. It just goes out, go up, go down, just sends the signal out. So that's important to remember.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I did neglect to mention the people that are living right next to our new Bow Center Tower, their coverage isn't good. They are under the envelope. So even though they're right next to the tower, it's gonna go right over them. So they don't even get better service.
That's on a hill. Okay, right?
All right, so I'm gonna start going into some of these propagation maps. So this first one shows the current coverage, and this is prior to the Bow Center Tower. So this shows a few existing towers. So there's one up here at Lucille. There's one down here at the Public Works, and down here at the truck stop. So you see the green areas are areas where there's good, strong coverage. The yellow is moderate. The red is, maybe a bar. You could probably get a text out if you needed to. And then the white is essentially no coverage. So you see, these are the town outline here. There's Bow Center right in the middle there. And then, so I want to point out that these are modeled coverage. It's not an exact representation, and that might change based on weather conditions or any number of factors. So this is a model. That's the first thing to remember. The next thing I want to point out is as we get into pointing out proposed locations of towers, is that they are not meant to be an exact pinpoint. We want a tower right there. It's meant as a general representation of a suitable area. We have not identified landowners at this point, and there are a number of factors that a tower developer or builder would take into account as far as where they can access, where's a suitable place to build, where can you get utilities running. So all those need to be taken into consideration when you do these maps. All right, so that's our existing coverage. You see we have pretty large swaths with no coverage. This one adds in the new Bow Center Tower. So you see this new area with a lot of coverage right here in the middle of town. And then it also includes this tower down here, which is down here on South Bow Road. There is currently a tower that's used for emergency communications for the town of Hooksett. The town of Hooksett needs to replace that tower. It's in extremely poor condition. It's very old. And when they replace it, they would like to include Verizon as a public carrier as well. So assuming that goes on, happens in the near future, we will see greatly increased coverage in the southernmost part of Bow from that project.
Well, Carrie has told us that they are permitted, everything's permitted for Verizon to go on that, but there's still the issue of working it out with the landowner.
That project is primarily a governmental land use because it is a tower primarily for the emergency services. And those will be what is at the top portion of the tower that gets the best coverage. They will add Verizon as basically an auxiliary use that'll be below those. So for those reasons, they're able to come in under a governmental land use and don't have to go through the standard permitting process that went happen for the Bow Center Tower. And in addition, there is an existing tower. They're going to rebuild it. It will be taller, but it's within the threshold that they're allowed to increase.
Currently a Gaia tower,
It is.
and it's gonna be a flat tower.
And it's so old, they haven't been able to find out when it was built. As far as I know, they couldn't even find out. So that would be a great improvement for emergency communications and also for all of our Verizon users out there. Next, so this map continues to hold those two towers, and it adds a proposed tower in the area of Dunbarton Center Road, which would help fill in this corner of town. And like I said, this is not a pinpoint. It's just a general location that would help fill in that area of town. And this next one shows similarly continuing to hold these ones and adding one up here in the area of Branch Londonderry Turnpike West at Page Road. The third proposed site is up here in the area of the tennis courts fields at the school. And then all together, this is a composite with everything together. You can see a lot of green. There are still red areas. There's never going to be a plan that's going to cover every inch of town perfectly. But this is the proposal that covers the most amount of town with 3 additional towers.
Could be better.
Yeah. And so we do have printouts of basically existing and proposed. I don't know which side they're on here. So after the meeting, folks are welcome to come up and take a closer look at them out more features or any questions at the end, unless I totally know something. Okay.
Almost done.
Okay.
All right, so what have we learned doing all this, some of the best practices, talking to other towns, all the research, everything else we've done is we are recommending to select board that we come up with that we have this comprehensive town plan as we've created with the areas that we've identified. And it's critical to our success. We've learned that we don't want to be power builders and owners. There's the money that's involved, it's phenomenal, and unlike what Hooksett is doing, where they already have one, they're just putting another sort of different scenario. We don't want to, we're talking $200,000 or more for a tower, and we don't know how to build a tower, so we don't want to do that. We'd rather engage the developer and have them execute a plan that we create. It's important to know the laws and rules of telecommunications to protect the town and citizens from outside influence. There's a lot of FCC rules that tower owners, builders can use to sort of take advantage of towns if you don't know the rules. So fortunately, our town attorney does have some telecommunications expertise, but you have to be careful because there's these rules and there's certain rights to put in a tower because of government desire to have coverage nationwide. So you got to be careful about that and know what you're talking about. Public involvement is very important in this process. We definitely learned from that. We need the input from our citizens. And the committees that are specialized for complicated interests such as this, we'd recommend that to the select board for any other committee. When you have something very specialized, you really need to have that extra focus to support your select board and the townspeople in making these decisions for the town.
So, after 19 months, we have completed what the charge was, which culminated in this meeting. So we have to figure out what the next steps are, what the future role is for this committee. So, I guess moving forward, we'll do that. We'll figure out where everything drops and what needs to be done. We wanted to do and in the works is a drive test for the Bow Center Tower before we actually, do the other stuff, because we want to find out when somebody is driving through town, when somebody's driving from Dunbarton into Concord, what's the coverage? You could say, yes, it's covered, but it might be one block, but can you make a phone call? Can you make an emergency phone call? We actually, Selectman Kip had done a sort of gone around and did this because he's one of the few people that we know that has AT&T, and he said he had really good coverage. He walked up to the high school doors, and he sort of gave us a very unofficial part, and then to prepare the RFP to engage the developer to execute the plan that for the desired location, the identified locations, that once we bring this to the select board, review the submissions, see anybody that's interested. There's quite a few people that we've spoken to that, this is their wheelhouse. This is what they do. This is why we don't want to be builders, So we'll review that, and then when all is said and done, there'll be some connection, some relationship between the developer that's chosen and to be a conduit for other people to ask. Because obviously, if somebody here had a question, they're not going to go to the building. They're going to come to the committee or the select board to do that.
So what's important to remember is, in order to have towers, you need to have the carriers that want to come. So that's why, just for an example, the tennis court, that general area, there's a lot of kids that have cell phones, there's a lot of people that go in and out of that area. So it's the easiest to attract carriers. They don't want to go to a spot where no one is. So that is also the challenge. So as the one that's the new Bow Center Road has Verizon coming, we want other carriers to come on there too. So hopefully it'll be a similar process. Someone comes on and says, Verizon or AT&T, and then others follow. But that's why these locations were chosen, partly because that's where you have the most amount of people. So that's the important part, to get them to be on it. You can build a tower and no one can come. So you need to have people sign up for that, but these areas, again, they're approximate, they're not a pinpoint. So in those areas, would be the best to provide the most amount of people and to attract the most amount of carriers.
So we wanted to make sure it was clear and transparent to the public what expenses the town has taken on or may take on in relation to this project. The first is the contract with Isotrope for the RF study and the mapping. That was $6,000. And then there will be potential additional expenses. We had some additional map work done, the drive test to do an on the ground actual maybe verification of where the coverage stops and starts for that new Bow Center tower. And then the preparation of an RFP to attract developers would all be additional expenses. I was hoping to have some more cost estimates tonight, but we don't have them yet for those. And then as far as the actual development of these proposed towers, it's not anticipated that the town would take on substantial costs related to that. The developer would take on the costs and the risks. Of course, there's always legal fees and things like that that would be taken on, but there wouldn't be substantial development related costs. And then there would be potential revenue for landowners, whether that's the town or private members of the community who own property where those towers could go. We're gonna take questions right at the end.
So at the town location, what revenue are they getting?
For the existing tower, it's $1,500 a month.
And one of the things that we learned talking to other towns, Stratford being the most recent, they're using a developer that every time they add a carrier, they get more lease money. And not all the developers do that. So instead of just the 1,500, which no matter how many carriers go on our tower, that's all we're gonna get, 1,500, that's our lease. But there are developers that will pay for each carrier that comes on and negotiate a different amount. And the reason that developer is so attractive to us is like they assume all the costs, they assume legal costs, balloon tests, everything else. And if nobody comes, then they just don't get any money. And they have all those contacts. So they try to make this really attractive package to carriers and then throw it all out to bid to the carriers and try to get the best deal for everybody. So it's almost like a contingency type of thing. And then we just had, yeah, we just been.
So on our website, we have the final report from Isotrope is posted. And then on our website, we also have all the meetings and agendas, minutes, and then these links. And then this presentation will also be shared on the website, so you can go back to refer to it. You can see the maps up close, and the links will be there as well.
And you want
Tomorrow, very important. I know I'll see everyone here tomorrow. So you gotta remember to tell everyone else. Very important.
questions?
So we can take some questions from the room, and then I've also told the folks on Zoom that they can type into the chat, so I will monitor that.
Sue, would you like? Okay, so some suggestions, comments, and questions. The suggestion is, you limit to Facebook people. We don't do Facebook, so we didn't know there was a thing. So that could have limited it, went from 900 to 700. But I mean, if people come to a library, you could just say, do a questionnaire.
Oh, we did. We actually had it in the library, put out for all the schools on the website and put on the town website.
And the question. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we just do all, they put it at
The second question, they said they did it on Facebook.
we put it on Facebook, we did the same thing. We did everything.
Okay,
In
okay.
fact, we got our little sign up for both.
I mean, just in general, yeah. Okay, just a couple of things. You talked about the purposes of the committee, for the Bow Center 5 Neighborhoods Tower, that it might include, at least impact on our neighborhoods, effect on property values, and health effects. That might also be included in purposes of, the committee and what they're looking for.
I didn't know if you looked to, I noticed that at the end you mentioned Hooksett, but it wasn't in who you talked to, it wasn't in that list of towns.
Yes.
So that, since they're right, the other side of the neighborhood, that might have been, you know,
Yeah,
And if I
Carrie,
see you-
Carrie's talking.
added that right. Okay, that's the question. And so why did we automatically go 190 feet? We already did 190 foot, and that was a lot of controversy around that. There's an intermediate height that's common, it's only 50 feet. So it was maybe one more tower at 150, but for example, Sutton has several at 150 feet and 90 feet on the highway.
So the 190 is allowed for the new ordinances, but obviously, you know, the tower builder doesn't want to build anything bigger than they have to either, because it's more expensive.
Yeah.
So, but unfortunately, with our geography, and most of the tree line is 90 to 100 feet tall.
Right,
It's gotta
so-
be above the tree line, and then if you wanna get a few carriers on it to make money for the town, like you wanna have an increase.
Well,
instead of-
keep in mind though, Howard's only 150, the next guy starts 10 feet down, so it's 140,
Yeah.
130, and then all of a sudden you're under the tree line.
And then
That's why
they
you
won't
need
come.
extra. They won't come then. You need to be there for the third guy down to get.
Mhm.
Hopefully, areas would be found that wouldn't be as intrusive, and that would be the ideal, and then hopefully, you know, we get, but if we don't attract the carriers, no one's gonna build a tower,
Right.
so then we don't,
Assuming
then we
that
don't get the
have-
coverage.
If there are only two towers like AT&T and Verizon, which is probably the case, 150 would have done it. But I think, you know, obviously neighbors were not considered in this last one, that it might do it for the next tower or next
It would,
three
it would go
towers.
through the same
And-
process for sure.
Quadrant number one was an obvious choice, but that wasn't done. It was done in the middle of, had no consultation, so
Yeah, no,
having made a big major
we've
mistake.
learned from our mistakes.
Yeah, well, I hope, it's like, just, you know, include health.
One of the reasons I'm on the committee.
Yes. So just, you know, health effects should be included too, you know, worry about a school, put it in your school. So,
Go.
Obviously, health effects are.
Oh, let me get some other questions, thank you.
Yeah, so mine is more about the leasing. Obviously, this first tower, AT&T, evidently won that game, at the highest, the front spot. But looking at the chart of the survey, you know, Verizon certainly had more coverage. So how long are those leases typically?
They're 30-year, the one is currently 30-year and then 30-year option.
And then the smaller carriers like Cricket, are they actually separate units, or do they buy space? Do they buy frequency on?
They buy,
AT&T and
on-
Verizon.
yeah, like the US Cellular has its own, but, and they all share anyways, like my phone's on Spectrum, Spectrum uses Verizon. So it's, yeah, those are good questions, you know, T-Mobile has a lot of its own lines, but they share too. Yes, me?
I have a question about, the maps. Because you showed one map of existing coverage, and then the next map was of, with the new tower. And, the area where we are actually drops out of coverage from one to the other map. It's not additive.
So which
So if
one?
you go, we're in, we're above the high school, in the village shore, so it's like the, massive yellow, red, green, yeah, sort of that area. And then if you go to the next one, you see all that area becomes white. So it's like, for some reason, they didn't include other stuff.
So this one was more of the focusing on these two towers, and we actually, that, I think that's a mistake.
Maybe also, so
Because it
it
should,
was an iterative process to get these maps created, working back and forth with the consultant. And it could be related to that. And we had him go and identify a few more towers that were outside of Bow, and perhaps
which we
one of
did
those-
later, yeah, which
maybe
we
one
did
of
later.
those was having
Yeah,
an
because I
effect on
think,
that.
my husband said that St. Paul's put up their tower, our
Yes,
coverage improved.
because this is, when we did the initial maps, and we didn't want to pay for a whole bunch to be redone, but we did the initial maps. this area of tower coverage was not being covered. Yeah, so we, oh, sorry. So we actually said,
And then if you go back to.
yeah, see, we don't have the other towers up there. So we need to actually correct that for the presentation. Thanks for bringing that
Yeah,
up.
that's very good.
Because we noticed, like, why is there such a dead zone here? And we realized because we knew there was some coverage out there. We realized that the other towers had been included.
It's possible that I grabbed the wrong version of that for the presentation. We ended up with a lot of versions of that.
Yeah, we did get a lot of this.
It's possible I just grabbed it.
And, we've learned that, the tower companies, it's very proprietary material. They won't confirm anything. That's why you have to do your own drive
So
test
that's
and
right,
everything.
it's all models.
Yeah, it's all models, and they won't actually tell you, but they know exactly. But they won't show you, they don't have to share, and they won't share. You try. So, and one thing that was nice about working with our isotope, RF expert was he'd worked for several major companies, and he shared a lot of this inside information, like, they know, but they're not. So we learned a lot with that, so yes, thank you, we'll get that one corrected. Other questions?
What did you learn about the needs of our phones through this process?
As in,
Like, I'm thinking, do phones need to be like a certain age to pick up the signals? How is that affecting?
definitely the new phones have higher capability, and I recommend anyone at least get the SOS one, because then no matter, the 14G and above has the SOS capability. That's just my personal thoughts on the whole thing. I actually switched to a 14 iPhone because if there's no signal, it does go SOS to satellite. So that is an additional, now they have all the satellites in place with Starlink and everything. So no matter where I am with coverage, I could at least get an emergency message.
The other thing I'd add is maybe more important than the phone like device is your carrier. Because the mapping was based on any carrier, but not all of the carriers are on all of the towers. So if you have T-Mobile, for example, you might not have any of this coverage.
Yeah, so like Sprint and
Not to that, also that we're not going for best strongest band, right? We're going for the 700 megahertz, so you can call, make a text. You can't shop on Amazon and then driving down the road. Like, it's just a basic talk and text. And so that is something else we learned. We just talked about.
Yeah.
But that is something else we learned about cell phones, is like what megahertz provides you, or what 5G provides you, or LG provides you.
Yeah, so we weren't focused on those higher levels of like data, which is probably where the newer phones have higher capabilities, but that's not really where we focused our work.
Yeah, my concern would definitely be text too, but we just had to replace phones. And we did notice that my kids had inherited phones. They had 10-year-old phones. And it did help a little bit when they got the newer phone, not
technology is
time.
getting better.
But that did help, but it does kind of pull in that question of, does everyone in town, need to upgrade to a brand new phone in order to be able to take advantage?
No, because you can have the top of the line phone, you don't have the right carrier, it doesn't matter. So, or if you're not close enough to a tower, it's not gonna matter.
Phone on its own does nothing, right?
So I think that's why I recommend the 14 or above, or I don't know if Samsung or everybody has that phone, but having the satellites is really your only guarantee. And that's just an emergency text or something.
Verizon is starting that too. Connected with satellite.
Yeah, I have Verizon. Yeah.
Could you talk more again about the extra coverage that the school has?
So when everybody identified that there was a problem, with the cell coverage, and obviously that was a major concern, the district applied for grant money. And it was a good time during COVID and everything. And they got the grant money to put all these emergency radio systems in that transmit directly. So even if the cell tower was taken out, the radios go right to the emergency, right to the public safety building and other emergency, so that every teacher has a bag and a walkie-talkie. And I've seen them in the classroom where they grab it when they leave, or they can even do the emergency radio from their classroom if they were locked in.
Something, can I add to that?
Yeah.
So I think the school is focused on emergency communication, so they have backup plans for those emergency situations we hope never happens. that doesn't help you if your kid's staying late after school and needs to call you to tell you to come pick them up. So those are two totally different scenarios for communications.
Yeah, I thought I had heard you say that they had ways of enhancing in.
So the option the schools have, which is something the taxpayers could consider, is you can put boosters on each building that will then take the cell tower coverage and put it inside the building. So you actually have to have a tower on the building, and then it will go through the building and then distribute the signal inside the building.
But that wouldn't necessarily help like on sports fields or.
Well, it's the same thing, you could put up outside antennas, I mean,
Okay.
you could do that with boosters, I have an outside antenna at my house for my chicken coop, so that's a camera. It's boosted, sends the signal back into so you can do that, Verizon has, AT&T, they all have boosters, like you go to Amazon, we talked to our RF expert, and he said he has one that he uses to boost his Verizon at his house in Dunbarton.
The other thing is anecdotally, since the Bow Center Tower has gone online with AT&T, we've heard that at the front door of the school, there was, what, 3 bars? Yeah, so that's anecdotal, one person, but it does appear that there is some improvement for those people with AT&T and hopefully soon Verizon.
Hopefully
At least
Verizon will have 3 bars.
we don't know how far that'll penetrate into the building because such a difficult building to get into for cell. But
Yeah, that's, with all the great schools we have, with the brick and mortar, it's great for insulation, it's for security, but not good for signals.
And then there's the Wi-Fi within the building. I don't know if the students are allowed to use it or not.
The Wi-Fi, if anybody's gone to the town meetings, you can get right on it and stuff like that, but they do limit it, cause I'm a retired teacher, and you don't want the kids on their phones all the time, you are trying to teach them something too, so it's a, when I had a student take a phone call from a parent during the middle of class, or they're texting, and that's an issue too, so for and against on that one. Yes, sir.
Given the uncertainty around where, how far the coverage will extend and whatnot that we're seeing from the, Bow Center Tower, has the committee prioritized your proposed towers? Like if we could, do one and then a second and then a third kind of thing, which one would be best to put in first and then sort of pay?
The developer that's where the developer comes in. The developer knows what the company want, so they would reach out and they could say, I actually called Verizon and I talked to AT&T directly, some contacts that we were given with making certain connections and whatever. And for instance, we were looking at maybe we could put a couple on the fields at the school, because Nashua has that. They have little antenna right on the fields, and we put them on a light pole, so the tower company paid for the lights for the service. So I reached out to one of the carriers about that, and they were very nice, and they said, well, not to insult your town, but you just don't have the population. We're not interested. They're high maintenance, you have to schedule maintenance around games and all that other stuff, and, Nashua's Nashua, and a lot of users there, and you guys have woods next to your field. So he actually came out and looked, he's like, we're not interested, so.
So I think the other thing I'll add is that, so we have these 3 proposed locations. We're gonna put that out hopefully and maybe get some interest from developers. They'll probably go for low hanging fruit first, whichever might look like it's easiest to develop. If there's a willing landowner in the area, that's a huge hurdle. If someone doesn't want it there, then there's not much you can do about it except offer them more money. So having a willing landowner and just make a site that's actually feasible to build would probably be the first one they go for, and with enough of a population around it that it's going to be worthwhile so they can pull in the carriers to go on. So it's all, I don't want to say a game, but there's lots of pieces that have to fall into place.
The developer wants to sell a whole package. They're like, hey, you got 3 sites ready to go. You take them all. They don't want to sell one to AT&T and one to, and then their goal is to get one big.
And that was our goal with creating this townwide plan, is instead of doing a piecemeal approach, or maybe we got our one Bow Center tower, but it doesn't solve all the problems, to look at the whole town and say, this is what we need to solve it. Here's the package. Can you fulfill it? And we're hoping that will attract a developer to actually do it.
Follow-up sort of question. Do you have information on the towers and the amount of people, sort of circle range there, and how many homes would be by those?
That's something the developer does. I've talked to a couple developers and like just our survey where we know how many people have Verizon, where it's, hopefully we attract the Verizon perks, right? And I even used that when I was talking to Verizon. I said, hey, 80% of our users, I'm gonna exaggerate a little bit, are Verizon. We really want you to come to town. Would you be interested in doing so? Developer does that. That's their expertise. That's their meal ticket is to get all that information, gather it, and hopefully sell it. Because if they don't sell it, they don't get any money. It didn't cost us anything, which would be ideal. Don't forget we got Zoom people.
Yeah,
too,
I
right?
did have one question from Zoom. It was, if we had a timeline to expect T-Mobile. I think we kind of answered that. We don't know anything beyond
Haven't heard a thing.
AT&T and Verizon at this point. But hopefully more. There's room on the tower for more.
Yeah.
And there's also room on the tower for some public safety equipment as well. And I know some of the town departments are exploring that. And that's much.
Other questions? Oh, just make a follow-up comment, to what Carrie just said. That as members of our community, you don't have adequate coverage from your carrier. And you know that towers are being developed. The thing you can do is call your carrier and let them know these towers are being built. You as a customer would be interested in having them be on those towers. Honestly, is a community effort. Grassroots. Yeah. And while I have the floor, the other thing that I want to say very respectfully is Sue Wheeler has made some lovely snacks. So please avail yourselves of those. Thank you.
So they asked if the committee has already talked with the owners of the land in the areas we identified.
I put 2 feelers out to 2 general areas just to see what the reaction was. And one was like, well, I don't know, tell me more. And the other one was absolutely. So, but because we don't know where, this is where the expert, you can pick what we think is the perfect spot, and then it could be too costly to get an access road in there or utilities, and they can say no, they're going to run the numbers on that, and then they'll put it somewhere else, or they won't put it at all. So,
And that's exactly what happened with the Bow Center Tower.
yeah,
The original spot is not where the tower is.
right.
The place where they pinpointed the tower, they moved it. So
It was presented to the town in one location, which was a little farther away from homes, and then they ended up building it closer because it was less expensive. It was cheaper to put the roads and utilities in.
How much weight do the abutters have? So the landlord wants it, now the abutters do?
I can tell you from personal experience, not a lot. There's several of us that were in the current tower location fighting, and you don't have you can keep trying, not gonna give up, but that's one of the reasons I asked for the committee to be created and solicited people to be on the committee, because I felt like if we had an organized, educated effort, we'd make better decisions. And we just need more knowledge before we went forward, because we didn't want to learn a lot of mistakes from this first tower. And the important part is we realize what mistakes were made and don't do them again. So, but hopefully we find areas that were conducive. That it's going to be in somebody's backyard, most likely. How do you avoid that?
On the highway, street.
We don't have highways.
And it's not.
They're already on
really-
3A. We already have that covered.
Yeah, I'm pretty close to the highway, and I don't have cell service. So
Oh, which
I don't know
which
that
one?
That's a solution.
Which one?
I'm over all over.
So it's it's got to be where they want to build it too. It's their money.
How about the police department right up from that hill? It's not a hill, but it's near the schools.
So we actually looked into putting more. Now that'd be sort of duplicating coverage because we already have the Bow Center Tower, but the one that's there is not designed to support. You saw how big those antennas are. And you put smaller antennas. They might be able to add something to it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
It's already there, it's already clear.
But we really need to we really need to get the Verizon up and then see like how far is that covered. Do we need more there? We don't want to put something that we don't need either.
I was just thinking it's a clear, no neighborhood, I mean, directly.
There actually is.
I was gonna say, but right behind the
I mean, I at the police.
Yeah, it seems like an obvious choice.
Yeah. but there is a neighborhood right there.
Behind.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But you're right, it seemed like an obvious location.
Yeah.
I think that a few years ago that it was an oversight that the tower wasn't high enough or supported enough foundation. So as we mentioned, the monopole needs a lot of depth, internal depth.
Yeah.
So we don't know what the point, the construction is behind that.
The developer could come in, being the experts that they are, and say, actually, I think this is a better scenario for it. So the idea that we don't want to be power builders because we really don't know that much. And it could be an absolute disaster. And it's not a good thing. Yes, ma'am.
Just a question. The police tower does nothing for the high school or Memorial and elementary school?
No, because it's radio.
Oh.
Yeah, it's radio transmission.
So it supports the backup system.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, for the height, oh, sorry, I thought we were talking cellular. Yes, yeah. It absolutely goes right for the radio system that they have at the school, goes right there. As well as the Merrimack County Sheriff, also uses their channels, but it doesn't have cellular.
I have a question or comment from Zoom. It says, we live near White Rock and only use cell phones. Why has our Verizon service gotten worse in the last few months? Calls get dropped, sometimes you can't make a call, and they used to have great service. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if anyone else has experienced anything like that.
Somewhere on like.
Yeah, I live near White Rock and I haven't noticed that.
I guess it would be vegetation from the trees, and once the leaves fall, it might rebound a little bit.
I always have better reception in the winter when everything's like.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Definitely better reception. No, I haven't noticed. I don't think AT&T sabotaging anything.
Yeah, I don't know of any technical.
But they'll let Verizon come on the tower, yeah. Didn't do that. I can't believe we didn't get any comments on our picture. You didn't, nobody like.
Oh, I was going to, but I didn't dare bring it up.
You gotta laugh about these things. You have to find some humor in the. Other questions, anything else? Thank you guys for coming. Really appreciate it. You guys have worked really, your guys are really hard.